podcast.
Here we are, Voice of Electronic Music, episode number 49 with Justin Waves.
Have we begun?
We've begun.
Hell yeah, man. Well,
Here, let's see.
if I figure out these headphones,
There you go.
I really appreciate you having me on here. And yeah, like I said earlier, it's like really cool that you're doing something for our community and giving us a platform to speak. And it's really important that everybody, you know, contributes their gifts to the community.
Yeah.
And, you know, making stuff happen.
Right. Well, I mean, that was ding. That was the goal. You know, I just I wanted to you know, have something that we could, you know, just sit and talk, because I would go to these, you know, parties and you know, go out to shows, and I'd end up in the smoking section, and then I'm having these like long production conversations with people, and you know, it just kind of felt natural to turn it into something that we can share with other people. And, you know, we're very lucky to live here in San Francisco and the Bay Area, and we're just, you know, surrounded by a you know, epic musical oasis, you know what I mean? And so it's, you know, other people might not be so lucky, you know, if you're living in, I don't know, Alaska or something.
Reno.
You know? Reno. There's probably some
No, there's some
Reno.
cool shit in Reno.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're lucky here. As you said, I just moved back from LA. I was down in Los Angeles for 6 months, which is like the mecca of, you know, entertainment. But I found really it's just, you know, it's all about who you surround yourself with. Like out in LA, I was trying to network with music industry people, and I found myself meeting music industry people, but like in the like Post Malone, like auto-tune rap people.
Oh.
That's what like everyone in LA I feel is doing. And
Interesting.
I wasn't there for too long, so I can't talk too much, but I don't know, I think being around other people is really important, and community is really important. There was an artist I met out there in LA that he said something really interesting, and I resonated with, because I tend to isolate myself sometimes, and he's like, you know, you can't spend all your time in the studio, because then you're just going to write songs about being in the studio all the time.
Yeah, right.
So it is important to have a community, and you know, it will shape the things that you make, and be more relatable to an audience.
Right. Well, no, you know, and having input that is creative and inspirational, right? I mean, I do the same thing. I remind myself, like, hey, you know, watch some movies every now and then. Movies are like, for whatever reason, I rarely watch movies unless it's with other people. But, you know, it's a good thing to do, because, you know, the music that's in them is super inspirational, and just, you know, the swells of emotion that you might get, whether it's like, you know, fear or suspense, or, you know, like, you know, love and compassion and all that stuff. And, you know, that stuff is kind of cyclical, you know, and if you get depleted of it, you know, especially as musicians, we have our little, every musician has their little setup, whether it's a corner in their house to their whole freaking bedroom or the whole studio.
Oh yeah.
You know, and it's just so easy to just get, you know, it's cozy in there, you know, like
the synth dungeon.
The synth dungeon, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's easy to get holed up, and then in your own ideas, and you know, as an artist, like, you don't want to imitate others, so you do want to be on your own at some degree, but there's a healthy balance there, because if you go too into your own head, and I mean, you might stumble upon some cool tunes and cool ideas, but will it be relatable to anyone else? I mean, maybe not, but yeah, I think there's definitely a balance in making music for yourself and then for other people.
Right.
I like an example I like is there's one of my favorite records of all time is Speaker Box and the Love Below, the Outkast album.
Oh yeah.
And I felt like Speaker Box was like kind of the industry like standard Outkast album, and then the other side was like Andre's like crazy vision. You know, he's playing jazz piano and doing all these things I feel like most artists and producers really want to do.
Right.
There's always like historically been this like clash between like the business aspect side and then artistry, you know. So yeah, if you're too isolated, you're gonna be I made all kinds of weird shit, man. Like all my friends know, but getting back into DJing this year kind of helped, focus all my crazy ideas into kind of a direction that's that I'm pleased with. I feel less isolated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you give us a little bit of a sorry, we just jumped right into
this. Yeah, we
just
totally just jumped right into this. So my name's Justin Waves, and I started making music when I was like 12 years old. That's a little hot.
Yeah, it's super hot. There you go. You got a very mid-rangey voice.
I come from a very music background. So
Nice.
long before I DJ'd, I was playing in rock bands. I started my first band when I was 12. And that turned into like a screamo band, and then I was this MySpace emo kid during high school, and then we started some like funk hip hop band that started getting like label attention and like real music industry attention. And then after school, I pursued music with the goal to be a film composer, producer, and then I fell in love with recording arts, and that band started taking off during that time. And then that band turned into another band, and then 2009-8 hit.
Yep.
And I was already making electronic music as a hobby, but not EDM. I was making like electronica. I was like inspired by Postal Service, and I was making trying to make video game music. I composed like a wind ensemble piece in high school. I was making music, all kinds of music. It was a girl in high school that actually kind of was the gateway drug into EDM because she was a raver. And back then, ravers were just like these, they were weirdos, it wasn't a mainstream popular thing back in the day. And she heard that I made electronic music and gave me 2 blank CDs, burnt CDs, one with Tiesto remixed Elements of Life remix album.
Oh, wow.
So it's all like trance artists. Which I heard, it blew my mind because that was like
it's
melodic,
a little
like
hot there.
Coming from sorry.
Yeah.
I got some boom in my voice. Coming from like the musical background that I'd had, I enjoyed the trance records. And then she also gave me another disc that had just random artists on it. And there's this one song on there by this guy named deadmau5 that I really loved. I was like, this is such a cool record. It was Alone With You, that song. It was just so weird, like different and weird, and it definitely, I started like experimenting more. And about the time when I left my last band, or that band left me, it's a long story. I was like kind of one of the key writers in the group, and they got pissed that I was making more electronic music than I was writing band songs, because we'd play a show in our band for like 40 people. In San Jose, and then on the weekend I'd go to San Francisco and I'd go to Kelly's Mission Rock, and there'd be 1,500 screaming girls, Steve Aoki, and I was like, this is the new rock and roll, man. It's just like, I don't need to rely on a band anymore. I have a whole band in my laptop now, and
bands are tough. I mean, just keeping everyone together and scheduling, and
so tough.
And then the drummer drinks too much and has a cocaine problem.
Yes, I've dealt with all of that, actually. It's funny you say that.
Right.
Bands. I mean, just gathering musicians together to do anything, because like we're some of the most egocentric people in the world. It's a product of the environment that we're in, because we'll get on stage and we have like hundreds or thousands, depending on how successful you are, people cheering for you. And that does something to your psyche, You think some people think they're better, bigger.
Yeah.
And in the any competitive environment can be toxic, and you get clashing egos going on with groups of people. Yeah. So it does take a special group of people, and it takes a pure passion for the music alone for projects to be successful when you're dealing with groups of musicians.
Yeah, I felt my music got even better. Of course, bouncing ideas off people and stuff is essential, and some of the best stuff has been made in groups of people.
Absolutely.
But I tend to really like to just dive in on the minutia and come up with sounds that really resonate with me, and when I collaborate with people, a lot of times I like to even just like send files back and forth, like you mentioned, postal service.
Yeah.
Even if you're living like within close proximity. I mean, being in a room and jamming out is awesome too. But I tend to find that my most productive collaborations are kind of like here, like I've worked on this, I've gotten this far. Pass it off. You add something back and forth, because then people can have like, there's no like, we're looking. It's.
Yeah. Steve Jobs had a like quote. He had several of those, but
Many quotes.
but it was something along the lines with like every great product. It's like rocks. It's like stones in a rock tumbler, and you have arguments, and people are clashing with each other and ideas, and they tumble, and eventually what comes out of this solid, like smooth stone or product. But yeah, like you said, teams of people you can't beat.
Yeah.
Especially if they're organized, and if the leadership isn't too into their own head. And there needs to be leadership, and it takes special types of people. That's why I said, man, in order for things to happen in this community, people need to put all their talents forward. You don't have to be a musician to contribute to this community. And yeah, man, if you're good at organizing people, help musicians that have no idea what the hell they're doing other than make music, like do something with it,
Right.
This is how all the big things get started. There's typically one or two people at the helm, and then everyone else putting in their efforts too. I think that's why the whole collective model is so big in the music industry, because there's so much competition out, and it's having a collective or label that is like all focused on a similar vision is invaluable.
Yeah.
But anyways.
Yeah.
Tangent.
Yeah. So what you're making techno now? I'm making like melodic techno. Yeah.
So when I started making electronic music, I didn't know what the hell was going on. I just liked hard hitting electro. I come from like playing rock and roll, so I liked the high energy stuff. And then when I started to DJ, one of my mentors, he was big into underground house and techno and Dirty Bird and stuff. And this is in like 2010. About 10 years ago.
Oh, wow.
So back then, Dirty Bird was there was a pretty niche like community around it. It was mainly San Francisco deep house people, and then a bunch of kids like me. And I got into like making really obscure tech house and techno. So I actually kind of started making records around in that kind of realm, and then. Over time and time again, I've like tried to fit into a mold of someone else's vision. Like, so Dirty Bird, for example, I was trying to make Dirty Bird records, and then I was trying to make. I was really into this French label, Sound Pellegrino. I actually won their remix contest in 2011.
Nice.
Yeah, and people around the San Francisco scene knew me as Mr. Sound Pellegrino for a while, because it was like my only successful thing that I'd done. They knew I was like a decent producer, but like I didn't have any records out or anything. Yeah. That's when I met Ardalan and the whole group of people back then. I was actually introduced to Artie through a Techie Latex, a Sound Pellegrino. He came and played anyways, long story.
Yeah.
So after that, I started to experiment with like making halftime music, and then like the trap boom hit, and then I started to dabble with that, and then but my skills as a musician have always been melodic, so I tried incorporating my melodic side to the halftime trap beats, which it turned out to be future bass. But when I was making it, no one was calling it future bass, but a lot of people were trying to do it. And then, as you might remember, I threw and had a collective. I helped throw a party in San Francisco called Subculture.
Oh,
that's
yeah.
how James and I think that's probably how we met.
Yeah.
And then we had some successful parties, and we started playing all around. We played at 1015 a lot, and we again, I just actually that's a interesting one. So we were making future bass. We were kind of a collective focused on that. And there was a track I had just gotten into a breakup, and there's a track where I sang on. And historically, I haven't like sang on a lot of music. I was always a guitar player in the bands and keyboard. And the people liked the song, and it was really catchy and weird. And so that's actually kind of what propelled the next stage of my musical career. We're getting to what I'm making now very soon. But I started to experiment more with singing on my tracks, and it really separated me into a category which I didn't even know what it was. But I was more interested in creating something unique and something that had a unique voice, which was my own voice, actually. So for like 3 years, this is when I lived in San Francisco. This is when I started really doing that. I started focusing on having like singer-songwriter like house music. And people told me I sounded like Rufus Du Sol. I didn't even know who that was at the time. So, but I was inspired by like, artists like Bob Moses and stuff like that. I wanted to make something live. And I started to do that. And a good friend of mine, he does the event management at Halcyon, or not Halcyon. We're in Halcyon. Yeah. Great Northern and Monarch, Benjamin Kay.
Oh, yeah.
Ben. He booked me to play at Monarch. Great Northern. Opening for Telepop Music, and that was my first like doing the live thing, totally different style. But and then he ended up booking me at Monarch a couple times, doing the live set, and each time I worked on it and got it more kind of dialed down. And one of those sets, the last one I played, Rob from Hush invited me to play at Outside Lands this past year, so that was another just positive step into that. And then after that, leading up to that, my music, I felt like it didn't fit anywhere. I felt like it was too pop for the dance floor, and it was too dance for the radio. So, which is interesting because I watched this documentary on Eiffel 65, and that's what they said about their music when it came out, is Blue was it was a disaster on the dance floor. It cleared the floor when it came out. If you can believe that.
Wow.
They thought it was a failure. And then there was one radio DJ in Italy that kind of put it on and made it famous.
Holy cow.
Yeah. Can you imagine that song, such a huge hit, but like they were stuck. They didn't know what to do with it because they put it on a dance floor and everyone cleared the floor because it wasn't.
Some things are just ahead of their time, I think.
Yeah.
Or take a while to catch on. Maybe.
Yeah. So yeah, it's daunting as an artist to go off kind of on a limb and not know where you're going to end up and know who your audience is going to be. Like if I was to just say I'm doing techno, I know exactly what my audience is going to be, and so that's what kind of I had this epiphany at Burning Man this year. A couple epiphanies,
as one does.
Before Burning Man, I was. A friend of mine, Andrew, he started this pedicab business at the music festivals many years ago. Him and I started this like mobile silent disco on these rickshaw bikes. We actually started here in San Francisco, and we started doing it at music festivals. And this past year, I went tagged along with him around the whole country, and we hit up all the music festivals. And not only did I like ride the rickshaws and pedicab people around just for money and fun, we did the silent discos at Bonnaroo, Electric Forest. We went around the entire country, 5,000 miles. And I was doing DJ sets, and I was just having so much fun because like prior to that, I was focused so much on this live act that I forgot how much fun it is to DJ, and that I know how to do it.
Yep.
So all that kind of led my live stuff into me making it more more club friendly and danceable. And then a set which I didn't even actually see at Burning Man, the Township Rebellion's set. Everyone talked about it, and I listened to it on the way home. It's incredible, and it kind of puts all like everything I wanted to be as a musician. Like it combines like techno and melodic and really epic songwriting. And so as of right now, I'm making best known as melodic techno with vocals on it. So I've combined my live set stuff, but I'm DJing it. and my setup includes these things now, and
CDJs.
it feels good, man. It also feels good to play other people's records too, and not feel like I have to play all original music. But I've done that, and it's fun to do. But I like being a part of a community and not being so like in my own head. Yeah, it's just good for my mental health, and it's just funner.
Yeah, well, it's fun playing songs that you really like that someone else made, right? Because you're disconnected from them, whereas you can't be disconnected from your own music. No, you're hyper connected, right?
You're hyper connected. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I really resonated with what you said about not fitting into a box, or in someone else's music, because I experienced the same thing. I think everybody, once Dirty Bird kind of blew up, was like, oh, that's a fun sound. Let me try that out a little bit, and I made some cool stuff there and the thing I always say is too, the reason why that didn't work is because no matter how hard I try to sound like somebody else, it never really works, right? Because it always just ends up sounding like me. Yeah. And so when I listen back to the stuff that I made with kind of that inspiration, I still enjoy it very much, and I think they're great songs. But they weren't what I was trying to make them sound like. But in the end, it was better because they ended up just sounding like me. And then kind of, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I do think that, as I've realized, like, hey, like I'm just gonna make the sounds that really, really that I like, that resonate with me, and hope that other people find that awesome as well.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing. Like, everyone has the ability to create something unique. I read this book by the painter Alex Gray called The Mission of Art, and there was a chapter in the book where he talks about basically saying that if you have your own vision that you stick to, you never have to worry about imitating anyone else. It's always going to be you. And everyone has this ability, but it's scary to do that, especially in this like hyper competitive environment we're in that can be toxic a lot of the times. Especially there's any competitive environment, you're going to have toxic people that shoot your shit down. And if you're a sensitive artist, you might listen to those people and find yourself in a hole for fucking years.
Right. But that's just people projecting their own insecurities and their own downfalls. I posted one of the recent episodes on somewhere online. I'll just be vague. And one of the comments was like, well, you didn't talk about anything, and that guy doesn't do anything. And it's like, okay, well, I mean, whatever. I mean, we're here in this world, and in this world, that person actually is going out there and doing some cool stuff. So, Twitter egg number 85. Like, I don't know who you are and what you're doing, but you might want to, reflect a little bit. It's just sharing. It's putting it out there, and you have to be okay with taking risks, and with your own personalized sound. It's a huge risk because, like in my case with my future bass stuff, like I sent that to you recently, my upcoming Obsidian EP. Yeah. And a lot of that stuff is, I don't know where it works. I have no idea where it works. I mean, I make it for like the festival stage and for headphones, and it has a cinematic feel, and it gets really kind of gnarly and trippy at times, but I have no fucking idea where to put it. If you were to, I just call it bass music or future bass or I don't know what, but even that doesn't feel right, you know? But, and it might take 5 years, it might take 10 years, who knows? You might be like, what was it Leonardo da Vinci, or one of those artists like made stuff and then died before it ever even got popular.
Van Gogh.
Right?
That guy had a life, man.
and
cut his ear off.
Oh man.
Damn.
Just aspire to, maybe he was so troubled and he was such an artistic genius that like that was his only possible outcome.
Well, and then you have people like Kurt Cobain that like just couldn't do it anymore.
Right.
It's gnarly.
Yeah.
But like you said, you really have to put your shit out there to know if it's not going to work.
Yeah.
To know if it fits anywhere, because I hear a lot of stories of records that artists didn't think were going to make. Didn't think we're going to be big at all, and then that's the one that fucking took them over the edge. Like Rebuke, he had that song Along Came Polly, and he thought that was a throwaway track, And then Jamie Jones plays it in front of like thousands of people at a festival, and it kickstarted his entire career. So that happens all the time.
Yeah.
I know Kings of Leon thought "Sex Is on Fire" was a horrible track, and that was it was like one of their biggest singles.
Jesus.
Yeah, so you got to do that. You got to put stuff out there. And I've now learned that when I put a record out and I realize people don't like it, I mean it's such a gift. Like, failure is so key to success because it really will open your eyes. It'll make you think differently. If you're hiding behind your computer the whole time and you're not putting anything out, taking chances and trying new things, then you're going to stay in the same place for forever.
Right. I mean,
You know?
yeah, I mean, business entrepreneurs say that all the time, like fail often, fail hard.
Yeah.
And, put your stuff out there. And I started like putting stuff out there and almost kind of like expecting, like waiting for people to hate it. And then you get some positive feedback and you're like, oh, wow, that's cool. Like, that's better than expected, right?
And I notoriously have been bad at that. I like in the 2016, I won this Northern Nights remix competition. It was with like a trappy, like Jack U sounding track. It's funny, totally different than what I make now. But I was this close to not entering it in because I didn't think it was finished or going to be good enough.
Right.
And my buddy's like, dude, if you do not submit this right now, I'm going to be fucking mad at you. And I did. And I 2 weeks later, I found I won first place. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
It's so wild.
So, for years, that was a big hurdle I had to,
But that comes back to what I always harp on is that you're so hyper connected to your music that you lack all objectivity.
Yeah.
You cannot be the judge really of your own. I mean, you can to a certain degree. You can put it up against what you did in, a month ago or a year ago or 10 years ago, and you can watch that progression. But man, I mean, it's somebody else really has to, like your buddy, he's like, dude, you have to send this, and if it was left up to you, you might have not sent it,
Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to fucking send it.
Send it.
Just send it.
Yeah, you got to put it out.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my whole idea behind this YouTube thing. I haven't been on YouTube. I've never put music on YouTube, and it's the biggest music platform on the internet.
Yep.
And people don't realize that. It's the second most visited website. There's like 2 billion active users on YouTube. So, but I wanted to find a way not just to put music out, and I've had a lot of people ask me about music production tips and stuff. So I've seen a lot of YouTube people that do that. So right now I'm in the process of making it unique. And but I'm gonna start. My gift back to the community is gonna be a little production tip videos. I'm gonna start with like a kind of a basic one for beginners, how to like structure your DAW in such a way that it will basically set you up for success when it comes to mixing and mastering, which is that's a whole nother realm that took me, because I came from being a musician. So for years, like even when I started making like Postal Service stuff on Fruity Loops 4, the music wasn't bad. I've never been bad at the music aspect, but the whole other aspect of production is like this science that took me many years, and I'm still just now kind of getting decent at it. And I think I'll forever be a student when it comes to that. It's kind of like one of those endless,
You never stop.
Yeah,
learning.
just like, jazz piano or whatever, like, which is another weird hobby of mine. But
Oh, wow.
yeah, that's something I'll be good at when I'm like 60.
Just ramping up.
That's when the jazz album's coming out, you guys.
Right, when you're in the old people home.
Yeah, that's
Fucking Justin Waves over there killing it.
Old waves.
Been busting out the White Claws in the old people home.
And the jewels.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Julian and White Claw.
Julian White Claw. Yeah.
Oh man,
Back
that's
in our
great.
day.
Right.
Yeah. But that's like it's interesting because it never used to be like that. Like, you'd write songs, you're a musician, you'd be in a band, and then you take it to a recording studio, and then they have engineers and producers now. But now in today's like hyper competitive like music industry world of electronic music specifically, you really have to be both a sound engineer somewhat, like to some degree. You don't have to be like insanely like, you don't have to be a mastering engineer, you don't have to focus all of that, but nowadays, like a lot of the music's too like tied in to the production inside.
Yeah.
You can make like your stuff more musical using production tools, and especially if you're in like a genre that's like sound design heavy, like future bass or something, where you're actually manipulating production tools to create, you know, rhythms and stuff. So it's interlaced, but it's like, you know, they say you have 10,000 hours to master something. I feel like in EDM you have to put in the 20,000 hours, because you have your 10,000 hours on being a composer and a musician, and then you have your 10,000 hours on making it sound good in clubs and studios and speakers, which is a science that it's not easy, folks.
Right. Well, and then you 10,000 hours being a social media expert and
exactly.
Your own photographer, however that works.
That's why it's extremely advantageous to have a group of people around you that all have a focused goal.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's I kind of feel lucky in some ways, because this is just kind of always what I did. You know, I realized at some early age that you know, I was probably 21, that I wanted to do, you know, get into engineering and live sound and that sort of thing. And I was making my own music, but I really feel kind of, you know, hashtag blessed that, like, I, you know, started in that direction, because now, like, that's kind of how the world is, and not just music industry. It's every industry, right? Like, if you're a real estate agent, like, you better be making videos and, you know, like, maybe start a podcast and all this stuff. And so much of it necessitates content and frequent content, you know, but again, like what you were saying about, like, you know, the community, like, I feel like it should be less about the people that focus on this content as like, oh, well, I just need everybody to know who I am so that I can sell more houses and that sort of thing, or make, you know, get more music or more gigs or whatever. It becomes an obvious advertisement.
Yeah.
And where you really start to get, you know, people that are interested and curious and eventually listening is if you are actually giving back to the community.
Exactly.
And it has to be like, I'm doing this because I want to help people.
That's precisely what I'm doing on YouTube. Is like, I legitimately want to share my knowledge. If I disappear tomorrow, I want that everything I've learned on my journey to be somewhere out there for someone to find it. You know, it's like my gift back to the community. But at the same time, you know, it's going to funnel back into me, and that's cool. If you like my records, then you're, you know, I don't know.
It's
Spotify it, or I think I might make a Patreon. That might be a route I make.
Yeah, I just got one going.
Yeah, did you?
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I was going to start off the podcast with that, but we got so into it. But if you like what we're doing here, check us out on Patreon. It's patreon.com/Scott Brio. Anything you can give patron-wise is a huge help. But I do feel like, you know, that's another new thing too, is this idea that people are willing to become a patron and give for something that they really like find usefulness in, you know. And it's weird. It was weird for me to wrap my head around. But then, you know, you start to see someone like, you know, like Jordan Peterson, or a lot of these people, you know, or like people doing, you know, big YouTube tutorials and that sort of thing. And it makes sense. I mean, if I'm getting like I mean, you know, you have to dive into the world with free content. But it's just something that you're passionate about, so it's not that big of a deal, right?
Yeah.
If you were asking me to, like, you know, work at a can factory, you know, for free, like, it's not going to work, you know?
Yeah. You're finding a way to do what you've already been doing and package it in a way that can be educational or provide value to other people.
And it's really never too early. I have some of my bigger YouTube videos, ironically, are my old Reason 5 tutorial videos where I'm working with like an MBox 1 and, like, you know, I mean, this is flashback.
Wait, you made those?
Oh yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
You use Reason, nice.
Oh, I started with Reason and an ASR 10 sampler keyboard, but you know, actually my biggest YouTube video to date is a webcam video.
Really?
And it's like, it was one of those things. It's like on TikTok, like everyone's always like, oh yeah, the TikTok that I made that like spent like 10 hours on got like no views, but then the one that I just whipped the camera out of my pocket and did in like 5 seconds got like thousands, you know. And it was this webcam video where I was like, I had this kind of, you know, normal for the time Logitech camera. And, you know, it was good, but I wanted more of a wide, like, you know, angle to it. And so I had this little iPhone, the same lens that I have there.
Yeah.
It was a little bit smaller. And I was like, how can I attach this thing to there? So I just glued a washer on there, and it had a little magnet, and I just stuck it on there. And then I just made like a DIY wide angle lens for your webcam video, and it has like probably 50,000 views,
nice. That's rad.
and still gets people like commenting and all that
that's
stuff.
cool, man.
It's just funny, you know.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But yeah, it's never too early to start. Like regardless of, even if you've found something, you know, you've only been making music for like a year or two, it might seem silly, like you kind of have this imposter syndrome, like, oh, what do I know? Just put, you know, it's not always too about, I mean, because there's always someone that's going to be 1 month in that might find your stuff, you know, and then that's your community, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so and it's not my channel's not gonna be completely focused on that. It's gonna, you know, I'm an artist before anything else, so I'm gonna do some live videos of some of my new stuff really soon, actually. So the YouTube channel isn't up yet, but if you follow me on Instagram at Justin Waves, you'll hear about it when it's ready.
Yeah,
I just got the intro on the videos all set up, so it's looking cool, man. I'm really excited.
How do you something that I've been kind of like not struggling with, but just weighing lately is like, you know, branding across all your social media. Do you keep it all consistent, or do you just like do each one piecemeal?
That's a good question, because this is something I've recently like put a lot of thought into, and it is important to be very consistent across all your platforms and have something that's unique and visually appealing that marks you as an artist. You know, and it doesn't have to be crazy, but it's very impactful and powerful to have that. I just actually watched a YouTube video about this, but I mean, any of your favorite artists have some kind of visual like brand attached to it that's consistent, and there's a reason behind that, and it makes it's easily recognizable. So yeah, it is important. And if you've seen lately, I have like a logo now, and it took a long time to finally find a logo that I liked. But
did you make it yourself, or did you hire someone or have a friend make it?
I actually made it myself.
Nice.
And I've hired people to make stuff before. I just never been like really stoked.
Yeah.
So I finally found something cool, and a logo is very powerful. Just having just like one little nugget of information that could be easily, you know, digested and spread across multiple mediums and put on a coffee mug. Mm-hmm. You know, that's really all you need.
Right.
So, you know, we could go on I like Deadmau5 obviously is a good example of that.
Oh my God, marketing king.
Yeah. And, you know, he's just a wizard, man, that guy.
Well, it's a good chunk of his money, I mean, of course, comes from his shows and stuff, but from like the merch that you can do with that the mouse head, and you know, like shirts, and just, you know, I'm pretty sure there was some at Walmart, and just, you know what I mean.
We can go off on that forever, man.
Totally.
Yeah, it's a really clever branding, and you know, that alone has transformed everything. And there's infinite advantages to that. So it is important, and it sucks too as a musician that having to focus on that. Especially, I've never been the most visually talented person. I remember when I was a kid, my little cousin, she'd be able to just imagine something and then put it on a page with a pencil. You know, just she had a very visual mindset. And then I, on the other hand, I could hear a melody and then go and play it on any instrument. And you know, that's something not everyone else can do. So everyone has their own, you know, talents and stuff. So another reason why it's important to have a team.
right, yeah.
But I'm notoriously guilty of like trying to do too much on my own. So, but there is something cool about, you know, looking at that logo and knowing that I did that. You know,
right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyways.
No, it feels good.
Yeah.
I've done both. I hired my buddy Rob Mine. You might know, he does
stuff
for 1015.
Yeah.
He did the stuff for the logo for VEM.
Oh yeah, he's super talented.
And I he's super good guy too. And I took kind of what he did and the layers and kind of have expanded on it a little bit, like I did the YouTube thumbnail or whatever. It's like a photo of mine, and you know, all my knowledge with like Photoshop and all that stuff just started like photoshopping like funny cat memes and stuff like that, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to take like a master class for Photoshop.
Yeah, I'm decent at Photoshop, but
Yeah.
I'm not a like designer.
Yeah, yeah. And then my Scott Brio one is literally just how I write it with like a Sharpie or whatever.
Yeah.
And then just scanned it and outlined it, and
That's
works.
cool. Like you don't have to be a crazy good designer too to make a good brand. I remember a really impactful, cool one was when I first discovered Disclosure. They had 30,000 followers on their SoundCloud and 5 tracks, and every track had a album art of that signature like picture with that white face scribbled on it. Have you seen that, like their branding? It's literally like a scribbled face over someone's face.
Oh, yes. Yeah,
you've seen that.
Yeah.
And then so all they had was their profile picture had that, and then their 5 tracks that had like a trillion comments on them. One of them was Latch, and that sparked their whole career. Yeah. I remember they actually played their first show in the U.S. In San Francisco. They played at the Independent. The homie Lights Down Low, they booked them at the Independent.
Nice.
And I met them afterwards. That was before, and then like the next year they were playing like Coachella with big guest stars and stuff.
What's that? And that scribble over the face too. That like has made its way onto like other people are doing it, but it's like a throwback. It's like a homage to Disclosure. Yeah. And it's like a thing now.
Yeah.
And that one makes me wonder too. I mean, the way that you described that, like, it makes me wonder, did they have a little bit of a marketing team? It's like, no, okay, we only have 5 tracks, and we'll just do this thing where we just scribble over the photos, and that's it,
Yeah.
And then you kind of let it build. I don't know.
I don't think they had a marketing team. I could be wrong. Who knows?
Yeah.
I know very little about that, but yeah, sometimes it's just a good idea, because like when I was in the band days, like every band needed to have their brand too, and it was always like some dude in the band that like can draw.
Right.
And I made our weird cover art on Photoshop back in the day when I was in the Screamo band. We were called Tomorrow Brings Forever.
Oof, epic.
It said that with like blood dripping on it and like scratches.
There's a website that has like all the different like metal band logos.
Oh yeah.
And they all look like the Metallica thing. They're just like, you could barely even like read what it says. It's like, it's hilarious.
Yeah, it's important. I'm just now kind of getting mine together.
Yeah.
I'm digging neon right now, and a lot of neon colors. So I'm doing like a lot of black and white photos with neon colors on top.
Nice.
No, I don't think any of that stuff's online yet, so there's a lot to be unleashed in the next month.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've been kind of big on earth tones and oddly enough pastels lately.
Yeah. Well, yeah, every brain's different,
Yeah.
So,
right.
But yeah, man. You did want to talk about production for a little bit.
No, not on this podcast. Yeah, man. Well, that's So I mean, I was looking at your. I always watch your IG videos and stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
And I've seen kind of I noticed you have the new Behringer 303 clone.
Oh yeah, man.
And some other pieces there. What else? It's some of the Teenage Engineering PO series.
Oh yeah, I got the little
Machine.
The drum thing. I use Machine. Yeah, we could talk about that. If you're a producer, you need to get out of using presets and start using. I think you need an analog synthesizer. I highly recommend just having one at least.
You heard it here first.
Yeah. It's just like having. I use mine basically like a plug-in. So I do all the MIDI in Ableton in my DAW, and but it's just you're gonna get sounds that no one else has.
Yeah.
Just by, and having the tactile knobs in front of you, it's just such a big advantage, and you'll make interesting sounding stuff and fatter, better sounding stuff too.
Right.
So my favorite combination is right now running. I just got that 303 clone like yesterday, so.
Oh, nice.
That's a new addition. I'm really stoked on that. But before that, I just had that the Okos by Make Noise, and that's such a great starter synth because you can use it for leads, bass lines, plucky little sound effects. You can make a kick out of it. You can do all kinds of cool things, and then You could run it. I run mine through a distortion pedal, and this is actually a tip I learned from the deadmau5 masterclass. Is that digital distortion just still does not compare to real analog distortion. That's just like one thing in the digital versus analog realm that can't really be like replicated the right way, or they're just different sounds. Some people like digital distortion, but if you want really warm, thick sounding, like fat sounds, especially in bass lines and stuff, if you use a saturator a lot in your DAW, try not using the saturator and using like a saturation pedal, like an analog saturator.
Yeah.
And it will just, something about it, man, just like you get those overtones, nothing's harsh, it's just nice and big, warm, fat sounding.
Yeah.
Goodness.
Well, I mean, distortion is introducing noise, right, into whatever sound it is, right? And so in the digital world, that clarity and that edge that you would get for, strings or like a lead synth or something is fine and great, beneficial. But I mean, if you're trying to add like some distortion, that noise, that digital noise, I could see how that would get really kind of carried away. And to be honest, I now that you're saying that, I don't use a ton of digital distortion myself. I tend to lean on stuff that's in my even like overdriving a mixer, like it just has because you're talking about actually overdriving like circuits and capacitors,
exactly,
and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and that's just something that's hard to like really replicate in the realm of ones and zeros. Yeah, and there's just something. And if you think deadmau5 is a good producer, which I do, I don't know if you do, he swears by it. He has this like $4,000 rack mount distortion unit. I forgot what it's called. It's this big yellow thing. He's like, that's my Frank's Red Hot. I put that shit on everything. But he's like, but you don't need this. Like he's like, some kid like just his band broke up, and you could get a cheap guitar pedal at a garage sale. It will do like, literally almost the same exact thing. So yeah, analog saturation is awesome. That's another reason why I like that Behringer 303 clone, is because it has a built-in distortion. Oh yeah. That models the Boss DS1 distortion pedal, so it's got that built-in. If you want to like get in the realm of making really professional sounding electronic music, you can't rely on digital plugins, especially presets. Like I said, it's a super hyper competitive environment. You're gonna have 1,000 kids using the same presets, or at least use them and like go crazy on sound design and make them your own. It's okay to use presets as like a starting point, but if you're just lazy and you just like, oh, bass line, boom. Yeah. Like open up Monarch and use a preset. Right.
Well, at the very least, that those sounds are yours.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no, I mean, I always, say this too. Like the reason why I like hardware synths, and even on top of that, like rare or vintage hardware synths, is because they're, your average person can't just download it and have it with all those presets, right? Yeah. So I mean, if you're talking about like VSTs, I mean, absolutely. Like what I like to do is I'll oftentimes just delete the whole preset folder, and just force yourself, make your own preset folder and just go through, and even if you only have 20 sounds, like at least those are 20 sounds that only you have, and they might sound like other things. They probably will sound like other things. Yeah. But man, I've made some of the coolest sounds that you listen back to, and it's more like in retrospect when you listen back to it and you're like, oh, that was that sound that I made with XYZ thing, and like did this weird thing to get this one sound, and like I have one sound I made this really kind of weird, I don't want to say iconic, but like I don't really know what it sounds like. A plastic, like electric guitar, kind of like a plasticky electric guitar sound, but it's a synth. It's actually Thor, and it's Thor in my propeller. It's Thor in my iPad. Oh whoa! And the Thor plugin in the iPad has this chromatic input feature where you can select the key, and then it will only give you the keys that are kind of like in your your range or whatever, or your scale, and then you can just tap and kind of slide your finger along, and the combination of like the sound that I made with that unique kind of like input method just made this sound that I'm like, wow, I could use this on a bunch of tracks. It'll be like kind of a signature thing. and I've never heard anything that sounds like it. And that's 1 out of 100, but like, that's a cool thing.
But that's you.
That's me.
And then you keep doing that, and then you develop your own sound. That's
Right.
just like, that's super key. And if you're a synth nerd like me, it's just fun to mess around on synthesizers.
So fun.
And make patches. Depending on how complex your setup is, like if you have a big Euro rack setup with like hundreds of patch cables going around, when you make a patch, that sound will like never be perfectly recreated ever again. It's
Right.
like impossible. Even you won't be able to do it.
Right.
Like the exact way that you had it now, you'll never be able to get it.
Right, because
exactly.
even the turn of a dial sometimes
Slightest knob turn.
can just be the difference between like a fraction of a voltage that is amplified by 50 or 100 down the line, and that's what's creating the difference, right?
Yeah. That's a rabbit hole that, man, if I start making money off music, or money in general, I'm definitely investing in a nice Euro rack setup.
We'll know where to find you.
Yeah,
just
in the synth dungeon.
A beard down to here.
It's the legend of old waves.
Right, yeah, old waves.
He's in the synth cave.
Right.
Yeah, that's gonna be me.
That's great.
Yeah, no, it's fun. So that's definitely analog gear is cool, and like the Okos, I paid like $500 for it. That's a drop in the bucket for, especially in the analog synth realm. That's not that crazy. And that one synth alone, you can do so much with, and it'll just completely change your sound. I spent a day on a Splice going through and sample digging, and I think that's important to do if you're on a DAW, and because your drums are only going to be as good as the samples you use, and it's cool to create your own sounds in that regard, but there's just millions of really good drum samples. Like, why are you going to recreate the wheel, if something's really good? So I think it's really advantageous to spend a day, go on Splice, and like, because you don't have to download whole sample packs. You can just pick and choose on there.
Right.
So go through and like find like 100 kicks, find 100 snares, find 100 hi-hats, and develop, and then have them organized in a folder, so you're not like going through scores of weird file navigation to like find a kick, So, because when it comes to writing music, you want everything to be quick, and you don't want to stop your creative flow by like trying to tweak a snare like mid-song. Like, that's something you should do afterwards. I think the writing process, most times I hear of like big artists talking about a song they wrote, it happens in like an hour.
Yeah.
You shouldn't write, it shouldn't take you less than like an hour to like write an idea of a song. And then developing that song into like a real finished production, that will take several months, or depending on how complex the song is and how like good you want it to sound. Like, I know the Skrillex and Diplo, they're talking about the Justin Bieber song. They said they wrote that in an hour, but or no, it was the
Where Are You Now?
Yeah, I think it was that song. It was one of their songs. They said they wrote it in an hour, but then they spent months replacing drum samples and like tweaking it, mixing.
Well, it's funny. I mean, that's what I try to do too, is especially once you have like, I always say like, don't just produce when you're inspired, because that's not a good habit to be in. But when you do have some inspiration, or you've sat down and you've dedicated some time to making music, really like try to get as much of it out there. Just, mental diarrhea on your DAW. Just get it out there, get all the sounds, try to flesh out as much of the song as you possibly can. Because then, it's going to take weeks and months, because in that, like, I really feel like if you are trying to mix a song, and then, if you do your own mastering, if you try to apply that same technique, it's not going to really work, because you really need the fresh ear. You need a couple weeks of thinking about it, listening to it, mulling it over, making small changes. You can't fit all of that. You need that retrospect. You can't come up with that retrospect without literally just time.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, replaying it.
Yeah, and time is valuable. You know, we don't have all the time in the world. If you're working on the side and trying to make a music career on the other side of your life, then, you know, every time you spend in the studio is valuable. So, it's extremely important to have a template set up. So when you open a project, you don't have to wire your whole studio back together. Yeah. So that should be a given. But I'm definitely making a video about that because that's something I didn't do for many years, and I was like, I was wasting my life, setting up my whole sessions from scratch So have a template for sure. That
can really kind of help you create your own sound as well, right? I mean, having your template, like I made my own groove files. Yeah. And those are saved in my default template.
Yeah.
And that's just one more thing that ensures that, like, even though, you know, your average person is never going to listen to it and be like, you're not using the stock Ableton groove files, you know, but it adds a feeling, it adds a character overall because it's blanket applied to all of my sound.
Oh, yeah.
And even down to, like, routing, right? Like, if you have, like, you know, if you route some particular way, you know, you're talking about Skrillex. I know there was that video released of Skrillex scrolling through his, like, he leaked a video. Yeah. That was a fascinating video. I watched. There's a guy that you know, Ahi. Ahee. He does really good tutorial videos as well.
I think it sounds familiar.
Yeah, but he did a breakdown video where he kind of analyzed it, and that was just fascinating because, you know, all of the way that he does it was just I was scratching my head. Because I know how I make stuff and I know my friends make stuff. But he would have, like, these, like, subgroups and then subgroups and then subgroups, and I do that.
Yeah.
But then he would have, like, 4, like, main subgroups at the end, and then he had a pre-master track, and then he does master. And people were talking about, you know, that he would send stuff to the pre-master that wouldn't have as much compression and limiting, and then he would send other stuff to the master that have more compression and limiting, and I'm just like, wow, like that's fascinating.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, definitely the times I've leveled up as a producer is when I'd work with another good producer, because everyone has their own little tips and tricks. Yeah. And like you said, like, having your own template is kind of paramount to having your own sound. I mean, it's like you can go to an art school and they'll teach you how to, like, technically, like, paint a bowl of fruit, right? They'll teach you, like, color theory and technical details, but they're not going to teach you how to become a Picasso or, unlike, like I was saying about the Alex Gray book, like, it is up to you to kind of create your own way of doing things, and then in turn that creates your own sound, and, you know. So yeah, building up a template and having everything kind of wired together. Like mine's set up really similar. I mean, I have subgroups. You know, it's set up kind of the way the analog console would be set up. I even use the Waves nonlinear summing tool.
Oh, I've used that. NLS.
At the NLS, I like to use that and put it on the SSL setting. So all my tracks kind of have that, like, sound, a little tiny bit of color to it.
Sure.
I don't use it on every track, but most of my tracks, it's on there.
So what do you do with it? You put the there's a channel plug-in. You put that on each of your channels. And
I put on each of my subgroups. Right? Yeah. So
do you have to use the bus for the channels to work?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But you might.
Yeah. I wasn't sure if they were, like, talking to each other, like
they are.
If they're rerouting the audio, or
so it's basically summing your audio in its own algorithm, as opposed to using Ableton's or whatever DAW you're on. So I put it on the end of each one of my sub buses. So I have, like, 8. I have, like, drums, hi-hats. I actually separate those to process them differently. I have my 8 basic groups, and then each one has the NLS channel strip at the end, right before, if you use a sidechain, because you want it before the sidechain, but you have it on the end. So in the signal chain, that's the last thing it hits. And then on your master bus, you have the bus plugin that it communicates to on the very beginning of your chain.
Interesting.
So so all the summing happens within that program, and it's supposed to emulate the sound of analog consoles.
Yeah.
It's not pure nonlinear summing. It's not actual analog summing, but it
adds something, though.
It adds a little drive and a little grit and color to it, which is fun. And it's cool. It's another thing that can, you know, add coolness to your sound, separate it a little bit.
Yeah. I've been wanting to get into like analog summing a little bit.
Yeah.
And it can be an expensive venture.
Super expensive.
Yeah, I mean, I have enough outputs for it. So I have the Scarlett 18920, which has
nice.
it has like 8 or 10 outputs, and that's fine. I mean, I would really, if I'm doing analog something, I'm probably only going to do like 4 stereo tracks or whatever. But I'm going back and forth as to they make the dangerous D bus plus or whatever, and like all these ones.
And those like
those are amazing.
Pro Tools HD rig things. Yeah.
You know what I think though is actually very high on my list of things to get is the SSL 6.
Ooh, yeah.
Dude,
when I saw that, I was thinking, man, if he had a 6 there, I was thinking about getting one too. Right. And yeah, it's not really like summing because it's really on like 4 channels or whatever, but or 6 channels. But I've read reviews and a lot of like nerdy like engineers like
it sounds fantastic.
It sounds great. It's their SSL pre's like you can't beat it.
Well, so the way that I would use it is I would track everything in through it to get that sound and maybe use the EQ a little bit. Yeah. And then after I've worked on it, send it back out. And this you could use it a million different ways, but this is probably how I would use it. Track everything in and then bus through it and use the bus compressor
onboard
on my
G
master.
series.
Yeah, on my master.
Yeah.
And that would be it. But I mean, if you watch some of the demo videos, like the one on Sweetwater,
I did watch that actually.
Hip hop, like, dude, the
He's
sound of that thing,
hip hop.
It sounds like a full SSL desk.
Yeah,
like that really has the sound.
It's that G series little
it has that
mini
soft, pillowy punch.
So good.
And like the character, and it's just it's like amazing. Like I need that. And for what, $1,500? Like
it's that
can that's all you need
for SSL EQs and pre's and compressor.
That was a really smart move of them.
Super
because
smart.
They're like, okay, so this is me imagining what they're saying is like, okay, so we used to have these giant like $400,000 desks, right? That would get sold to a handful of people around the world.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if you look at the way the trend is going, those studios are there's few and far between now, right? So a better idea is to make smaller products like this that everybody can incorporate, because your average bedroom producer is the final producer. Like that's it, right?
Yeah.
So let's give them a $1,500 thing that sounds like SSL, and then you're selling that to hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah. Well, they just made an audio interface too. Have you seen that?
I just bought it.
You just bought it? There you go. See? Yeah.
I just put a pre-order in for it.
I was like, ooh, I want it. But I'm like kind of invested in the UAD realm.
Well, so that's the thing is I have my Scarlett and I really like it, and it has all the outputs that I need. I have a patch bay and all that. So I bought the SSL audio interface because I really want to I just want to do a shootout, and I want to do a shootout video, and so that's what I'm going to do. And I want to test it, A and B it for my own sanity against like the Scarlett, and see if there's any noticeable difference. And then of course add the 4K. Yeah. And then what I want to do is add some plugins to the Scarlett stuff and say, hey, can we get this Scarlett interface? If there is a big disparity in sound, will this 1 or 2 plugins, will this work to add that extra bit of character that the SSL is giving you? I'm fully open. What I'm actually hoping is that the sound quality is not that much better, because I'd like to just sell it afterwards. They really don't need it.
Yeah, let me know, man. Yeah. Definitely let me know if you do that.
I'm open to the fact that I might have just eaten $280, and because and now I've reduced my studio to 2 inputs because they sound that much better.
Yeah, really?
You never know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I want to know.
It's brand new.
Let me know. Make a YouTube video on it.
I will. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. So let's see. Template, having your samples organized, not taking too much time writing. That's something I want to talk about. Is that I remember watching like so many huge producers I've like heard interviews with and actually had personal conversations with. Like, not every idea you have is going to be good. And I hear a lot of producers talking about like, oh, I need to finish all my songs. No, you don't. You need to create as many ideas as you can and develop the best ones, because even the Beatles threw away like 200 songs. There's like 200 Beatles songs you've never heard. Like Kashmir was saying, for every good idea I write 10 bad ones. And so a way you can... And what all the big writers do in the industry is they write a lot. Like Ed Sheeran, when he wrote that 2 billion stream, Shape of You, that song. I watched the interview, like the documentary, little mini documentary. They wrote like 5 other songs that day, and he thought that he was going to give that song to Rihanna.
Wow.
They're just powerhouse writers, and they write multiple songs every day, and they're just so good at it. They're able to output ideas really quickly, and when you have a special idea because they stand out and they happen very randomly, and you're not going to plan it, and it's going to just happen. So don't stress yourself if you're not finishing all your tracks. Make as many ideas, and you'll know in your heart when you have a good idea that you should finish.
Yeah. And
then you will just automatically, naturally finish it because you're like, this needs to be done. This needs to finish. I remember watching an interview with Zombie Disco Squad. I don't know if you know him, the old deep house, tech house guy. But yeah, he would do a thing where he'd spend an hour and write like quick ideas, or he'd write quick ideas in a couple hours in like a week, and then have like 30 of them, and then pick 5, and then just produce those.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah.
It's a feeling, and everybody has a graveyard.
You'll know. Yeah. Everyone has a graveyard, and then you can still go back to that graveyard. Deadmau5 has a graveyard in his masterclass. He's like this. He's super organized, and he has like chord progressions that he wrote in a folder, and he just dragged the MIDI onto a new project.
Whoa.
So he's got it all organized like that. So even if the idea is not good, maybe a part of it will be good. I find myself going back to old projects that never got finished, and then like stripping them out.
Yep.
And there's usually something in there that's cool, and then I'll start from there. And
there was the idea that you kind of latched onto.
Exactly. Yeah. And then you probably got the creative process, so it can be random, and it should be random. You should be riffing and coming up with ideas on the spot. And then just, magically they're gonna all align, and boom, you have your like hit. I don't know.
Right.
So yeah, that was one thing I wanted to say.
It's interesting that some people have these like hits that explode, right, and that kind of makes their career.
Sandstorm.
Yeah, right, or like Martin Garrix,
Yeah.
But there's also something to be said too for just like consistently good quality, right? Like someone like Odessa. Like Odessa didn't have any one big hit, for example, right?
Yeah.
Like it just the bulk of their stuff. I mean, you listen to it and it just creates this vibe and this feeling.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what caught.
They had a formula down. And that's if you're outputting music quickly, and you just kind of naturally, I think, develop that formula that becomes your sound, and you're gonna write tunes that sucks. Everyone does it.
Yep.
And so that's why don't be worried when you put out stuff that sucks, because everyone writes shit that sucks.
Right.
It's different when you have like a label and a team and people telling you, like, helping you out. And that's why we sit here from our consumer side, and we only see these like masterpieces coming from these people, and we assume they're just like
every
perfect.
Song. Yeah. Well, it's the Hollywood effect.
It's the Hollywood effect. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So there's that. There is. For me too, recently I've gotten more organized in my mixing stage. It's just something I've always, like I said, I'll never be a master. I'll be a student always. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
And getting more organized when you're done, when you feel like you're done writing a track and it's down to mixing side, having kind of a formula in that will kind of keep you from running around in circles, trying new things and testing levels, and like spending hours mixing and then having a shittier mix than you did before,
Right. Was there any one thing that you can think of that really kind of was like an aha moment for you in like mixing recently?
Yeah. For one, getting started with a volume balance, this is something I do it like as I write. You kind of naturally like balance the volumes of everything. But then I found it's better when you are done and you're done with that, and you want to go into mixing mode, turn everything down, bring up that one thing in the mix that you want to be prominent. And in dance, it's usually the kick drum. You want that to be kind of forefront.
That's your rock.
Yeah, kick and the vocals, right? Those are the things in the center. So you bring that up to about like -6, and then bring everything up, and then you start from there. And just having that done kind of gets everything in the initial right place.
Well, it makes everything more obvious as to where it should be, right?
Yeah.
It's not like you have like 12 balls in the air and you're trying to juggle. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, well, the kick is sitting well with the vocals.
Yeah.
And now, okay, where does this need to go? Okay, where does this need to go? Where does this need to go?
Exactly. Like
Yeah.
when I'm writing, I'm earballing stuff, and like you're also listening to it over and over again, so your ears get used to things. So resetting and starting over like that, it's made a huge difference. Another big thing I found is using, and I should have been using this many years ago, but this is I was showing you on Facebook when we were talking, is using SPAN, using a spectral analyzer, and using a reference track. I think that's insanely important, because otherwise you're just kind of shooting in the dark. If you have a professionally mixed and mastered song that's kind of in the same vein of the track you're making, and you're able to A/B your track and compare it to this track, it's going to help you kind of guide you on mixing decisions that you should be making. And that, especially if you're not in a professional sounding room or, acoustically perfect room, your reference and your mix, if you kind of match those together, you don't necessarily need to be in like a perfect room to make the mix. If you get it as close as you can to your reference, and also using the spectrum analyzer. So I use SPAN, it's free, and I've found everyone uses that. It's a powerful spectrum analyzer, SPAN. If you look at your reference and you could see visually how it looks on the frequency spectrum, then you can kind of match yours to that. And you'll notice trends in different genres. Like I was showing you, like the bass music, they typically dip out their low mids because that leaves their subs extra rattly, and also the bass gets a little warmer too, because your like mids are more pronounced when you kind of dip out the low mids. So it's definitely something to look into. Use a reference mix every time, and use the spectrum analyzer. And
I want to touch on that too. That EQ curve, right, with the lows and then the mid low dip, and then kind of the Nike swoosh, as I always call it.
Yeah,
it makes sense if you're thinking about like where different things might be played, right? So you have like your bass, your sub bass is nice and high, right? And so if you're on a big system, or your car has a nice system, or whatever nightclub or festival, that's going to be accurately represented, right? But if you're in like a car or like a boombox, those speakers aren't going to be able to replicate that, so it's just going to like fall off. But what you don't want to have is this low mid that these car speakers or boombox speakers are trying to replicate, right?
Yeah.
Those speakers are going to accurately replicate everything from the low mids up.
Yeah.
And so having those kind of lower low mids makes more sense, because all those speakers are going to be able to recreate anyway is mids and highs.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly. And there's tools you can use to accentuate upper harmonics in the bass. Like I use R bass by Waves.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and basically does that. It just like targets whatever fundamental note, and then you can set it. It's a really simple plug-in, but it will like know which harmonics to bring up and make your bass sound more audible on smaller speakers.
Max bass too is
Max bass is a good one.
Yeah,
yeah, that's a cool one. So yeah, reference track. What else? I've found myself not getting too crazy on my master chain, so I try to get everything to sound as good as it can. So on my master, I typically just use a limiter and maybe a glue compressor. Glue compressor. Glue compressor.
Yeah.
Maybe a compressor, like doing a very small amount. And if I do use a glue compressor, it's make sure that you're using that when you're mixing the whole time. It's not something you want to slap on the end. I typically just have a limiter on there, and then when I'm kind of feel like I'm finished with the mix, then I'll go on my master chain, and I do it all in one project. Deadmau5 kind of does too.
Yeah, I do it too.
Because there's really, for other reasons, if your CPU can handle it, there's no reason not to.
Yeah.
And then I feel like if I sign these records, then I wouldn't mind too much handing it off to a master engineer. It's kind of tough for me to do that, though.
Well, yeah, a lot of labels kind of want to have their quality assurance
Uniform
stamp on.
thing,
Yeah, because
exactly.
like their mastering engineer knows kind of what things to push and pull to make it sound like that.
Yeah, so I don't go too hard on mastering. I just try to get it all sounding as good as possible, and just getting the limiter right is the big thing. When you lower the threshold on that limiter, that kind of gives you an idea how it's going to sound like when it's mastered.
So yeah, mixing into a limiter was a huge aha moment for me.
Yeah.
Especially with my kind of future-based stuff, because what I would be doing is like if you're making like trap or something where like a lot of these, you have hi-hats and like sub bass and then some other weird sparse elements, but there's a lot of openness in the track, or like maybe like a Dirty Bird like tech house type thing, right? There's a lot of sparse elements and like gaps between the notes. Very small gaps, but lots of gaps. And if you're mixing into a limiter with a decent like threshold down, what you're hearing is it makes all of those elements much more present and up front.
Yeah.
And so you don't have to add as many elements. Like, I found myself like I kept adding these elements. I was like, well, it's too much now.
Yeah.
It's too much. But if you mix into this limiter, you're like, oh, okay, well now I only need like 2 hi-hats because it's already filled out, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
And that's kind of what you want to focus on for minimal stuff.
Oh, absolutely. I saw this really good video by Kashmir. He did a speech at A&E or ADE in Amsterdam, and it's a really, really good like just breakdown of just everything about electronic music. He touches into production, the business side. He's an extremely smart dude. I used a lot of his samples because he's a really good engineer as well. But he did this whole thing about there's this brilliant little segment in that about space in a mix, and I wish I had a visual representation, but he showed you like this 3-dimensional box what your mix should sound like, and you have your big kick in the middle, and then if you have like a little guy standing on the mountain, like the kick was like this mountain, and a little guy right there, like that kick looks it sounds bigger because you're creating this like invisible sound stage, right? So if you have this tiny little thing next to this big kick, then the kick sound, it feels like it's bigger. And then if you introduce another element that's like bigger than the hi-hat, it shrinks the bass, kind of. I don't know if that translates to this at all, but man, I wish. Yeah, check it out, Kashmir. If you know who he is,
probably like mixing in a box or
that's Kashmir ADE.
Yeah.
YouTube that. It's like a half hour, maybe an hour long presentation he does. It's brilliant.
Yeah, there's people always talked about that when I went to school at Expression, and they always talked about the mixing in this kind of like 3D box.
Yeah,
it didn't make sense to me for years, and then finally it did. And what really kind of made that like solidify in my mind or made me understand it was using like filters. Like I in my mixing use a lot of hard filters, and I found that I got my best mixes when I was applying like cutting out all the bass for here and then rolling a lot of the highs off and kind of putting things into these little spaces, right? Like like if you had like a shelf with a bunch of weird different like slots.
Yeah.
And you could sculpt these little things. Hey, Mikey, how's it going, man?
Number 31.
Oh yeah.
How you doing?
No, number 49.
Oh man.
Wow.
Yeah. This is Justin.
Justin, good to meet you.
Yeah.
Nice to have you here.
It's a nice leather jacket, Mikey.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Looking fly, man.
I'm old enough.
Yeah, I'm old enough.
65-year-old man wearing the Ramones coat.
Hell yeah, brother.
That's amazing.
Right on.
Yeah, so having putting things into these little spaces, in 2 parts, right? Like selecting the sound based on where you need it to sit in the frequency spectrum.
Yeah.
And then of course applying these hard filters and like reverb and all that stuff. More reverb is going to make it sit back. Less reverb is going to sit forward. Less highs is going to make it sit back. More highs is going to make it sit forward.
Yeah.
Kind of all of these things, and with all of those tools, you can really kind of put things where you want them to live.
Yeah.
And you have to do less at the end because everything is just kind of sitting there where it should be.
So I'm glad you said that about the reverb because that's something that's in my template that I learned from this engineer on YouTube. And basically, I have 2 verbs, one in a large space and one of a short, smaller space. And I send different amounts of both of those to like a lot of elements in the mix, and that pushes things back and gives things forward. But not having to slap a reverb on everything and making groups of sound like they're all in the same room by using the same reverb is just definitely something you should have on your template or master
interesting.
thing. Yeah.
See, I moved away from that. Because I got in this trap of having like, you know, my effects returns, and I would have, you know, 4 or 5 different effects on there, and I found that I was sending these things to these same effects, and what it started to sound like is it sounded like everything was just going through the same effects, and
Yeah.
I'm just, you know, personally, I found that putting the effects, reverb, delay, whatever, on the individual tracks kind of put them in their own space again. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So there's, and I do that if it's like sound design reverb, which I call, you know, if it's, then I'll use a different reverb. But just for spatial things, I do the return send thing, and then I'll, depending on how much stuff is getting sent into that return, I'll EQ it.
Oh, sweet.
Differently.
Yeah. Thank you. You can just leave it there. Oh.
Like the color goes through your shirt.
It's very nice. Thanks, Mikey. This is the beauty of doing a podcast in a nightclub.
At a nightclub,
the
yeah.
nightclub operates whether or not you want it to or not. It's just constantly. We've had episodes where people have been hanging stuff, and you know, you get the sound of the fridges, and
Oh, yeah.
it's I like it. I kind of embrace it. It's,
Yeah.
you know, it's and these lights have been flickering. So we have
Pretty cool.
We have a short in our light somewhere here, and so if you're seeing our faces get brighter and dimmer, that's because of that short. And I need to, if I tapped the wall right there, it would stop. I need to throw something at it.
I have a funny story about this nightclub. Maybe, and maybe it's a good story. It's got a lesson at the end.
Yeah.
I came here. I once, I had some records, and I'm really big fan of Injuna and I felt like I really wanted to get a demo to Jody Wisternoff when he played here. He's like one of the main A&Rs of the label. And a friend of mine worked here, and Chris Hallett, he's like, dude, I can get you backstage. You can meet him, give him a USB. Because that's infinitely more powerful than sending, you know, emails out, just being on the floor and, you know, active. So I got an invite from the owner, Gina, but I got here a little late, and the club was already packed, and everyone was kind of like drunk back here, and I couldn't get back here. Security couldn't get back here. So I had this USB in my pocket, and I'm like, I'm just going to sit in the crowd and enjoy this show by myself. For 4 hours, I just sat here and danced. And I kept trying to get attention of like Gina, but she was just like distracted. And then, man, I kept trying, and Jody kept having to go to the bathroom, so he'd like kept running upstairs back there, and I tried to get his attention and just didn't work. He was, you know, in the moment, in the zone. I stuck through the very end because I was like so dedicated to give him this like demo USB.
When the lights come up.
The lights came up, everyone left, and it was like 4 a.m, and I kept trying to get Jody's attention. He left and then ran upstairs, and I'm like, fuck, well, you know, I tried, and I was about to leave, and one of the employees was like, hey, don't leave. He's just going to the bathroom right now. He's going to be back. I'm like, fine, I'll stay. Mm-hmm. So sure enough, I waited, and him and Gina came down, and I was like, Gina, I'm Chris's friend. She's like, oh, Justin. And she gave me a kiss on the cheek, and then she's like, meet Jody. And I was like, hey, man, you know, it's always so awkward when you're trying to give a fucking demo to like a big artist. And he was like one of the coolest people I've ever give a demo to. He's like, you know, he knows, he's been there before. He's, you know, so he put his arm around me and he goes, I can't wait to fucking hear it, mate, you know. And then I ended up hanging out with him like till like 6 a.m. We went to an after hours after that. Gina like knows everyone in the city, so we got into this after hours for free, and it was like a techno party, and it was super cool. And I talked to Jody all night, man, and I just like persistence, man. I knew like I came there alone with a mission to give him a USB, you know, and like so I didn't hear back from him, and then I just said, you know, whatever. At least I tried. I got it in his hands. Is all that matters. And then 3 months later, I got an email from him.
Whoa.
And he's like, sounding strong, mate. Sorry it took so long for me to get back to you. You know, I'll forward it to the label and, you know, see what they say. But, you know, and I never heard from the label.
Yeah.
In retrospect, you know, those tracks were like, I'm so much of a better producer now that like whatever. But, you know, that's what it takes, man.
Yeah.
So that happened here. So it's kind of a magic story here that
Totally.
Yeah.
That's the cool thing about this space is this building is, you know, when things do end and the lights come up, you know, generally we kick everybody out, but you know, there's some time to, like, you know, it'll be you, and oftentimes the DJs come down and will dance with the audience that's left over, right? And like, it's pretty cool, and you know, the persistence is definitely not just, I mean, it's so important across the board, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, submitting to labels and you know, trying to gather, you know, a following and all this stuff, it just seems like it's such a thankless task. And you just do it over and over and over, and you might not ever get anything until something hits, right? And even like in this case, like something didn't hit in the sense that like Anjuna Deep like signed your track, but like you got to hang out with Jody and like go to an after hours. And
exactly, and he had kind words for my music. Yeah. He liked it, you know, and that's something when you submit to a label and you don't hear from him. It's easy as an artist to get like, oh, they must have thought it shitty. Right. No, they probably didn't hear it, dude. They had like 3,000 tracks sent to them last week. Or
he might have recognized it for what it was. He'd be like, oh, wow, I hear there's good in it. I like
but
this.
It doesn't fit our brand.
Or
doesn't
maybe,
mean it's bad.
Exactly. Yeah. That's probably the first and foremost. It doesn't fit our, because a lot of, like, even like Dirty Bird, like, has a very specific sound that they're willing to sign. But like, you know, also too, like, you know, where are you in your journey, right? So I mean, I've heard tracks where I'm like, wow, like, I really like what the person did here. The mix is terrible, right? And so, like, you know, and I'm not going to walk someone through and like take on a bunch of like free, you know, mixing sessions or whatever. But it's like, you know, that's where you are, and now, you know, your mixes are a lot better and you feel much more confident. But that wasn't a lost experience, right?
No, like, I still have his email, man. I'm gonna send him some of my new stuff.
Sometimes that's the most valuable thing, right? You know?
Exactly.
Because when you do get to that place where you have something, you're like, there's no way that this isn't like a good track. Yeah. You know?
Yeah,
and you can fire that off, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Don't click this link. To use reverse psychology.
Right, in the email subject.
Yeah, exactly.
Or title or whatever, yeah.
Virus, do not click. Probably shouldn't do that.
Spam.
Look at this fancy Halcyon water. No fucking way.
Yeah. We did a twofer with that. We both are saving the planet because they're paper-based, you know, containers or bottles or whatever, and also got some branding. So it says Halcyon Hydrates H2O, and I think they're technically cheaper too. So
badass, man.
Yeah, it's all a part of the look.
Sweet deal.
Better than Fiji.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hell yeah, man. This is awesome what you're doing, dude.
Yeah, thank you.
Let me know if I could help in any way. Make the theme song.
Dude, absolutely. Well, I was going to ask you. So with my Patreon, I'm wanting to release content that's accessible to only patrons, right? And so I'm trying to, you know, one by one ask my guests, like, hey, if there's anything you can hook me up with, whether it's just a small sample pack or like if it's relevant to other people, you're like, you know, Ableton template or something. Some people, like my buddy Sean Raya, his Ableton template is so specific to his studio that it would value nobody. Yeah, anything that we could release on the Patreon would be awesome.
Yeah, dude, totally.
Yeah,
I'll give you some tunes.
Yeah,
some
totally.
Tunes.
Something unheard of, or some choice. You don't have to make anything. Like, just select some things that maybe you know, and package them up and send them over.
Yeah, that'd be cool, man.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. That being said, check us out on Patreon. It's patreon.com/Scott Brio. We should wrap this. I really have to pee.
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot.
Yeah.
Instagram at Justin Waves.
There it is. Yeah.
And there's a link in my bio to like everything else I do.
Oh,
so
perfect. Yeah, it's a hub for
link
everything
tree.
else. Right. Yeah. Cool,
man.
Well, yeah, thank you for coming on. It's been a blast, and I'll have to have you on again soon.
I'd love to be on again.
You could just talk about the sound stuff forever.
Yeah,
you know?
we could. There's a couple holes we could have gone down.
Yeah, it's all right. Leave those for later, next time, right? Cool. Well,
sure.
This has been episode number 49 with Justin Waves. I'm Scott Brio. This is the voice of electronic music. If you want to check out all the previous episodes, we're on basically every major streaming platform, so SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, whatever. You can just Google it. And, of course, check us out on Patreon. If you can, anything you can give to help us keep the lights on and keep things going, it's only going to ensure we get, new, exciting people and different places and that sort of thing. So thank you for tuning in, and we will see you guys on the next one. Whoop. Peace out.
Nice, man.
Yeah, dude.
That was a good one.
Yeah,
It was fun.
absolutely.
I wonder how long that